Mary Poppins was once the sweet dream of childhood. But behind Disney's magic lies a cruel truth. The cast members gradually passed away, many in heartbreaking tragedies. Some lost their children, others took their own lives. Some lived with illness their entire lives, and some died alone in nursing homes. Prepare yourself, because this then and now journey will leave you both shaken and sorrowful. Matthew Garber as Michael Banks. When Matthew Garber was only 8 years old, he brought to life the mischievous and imaginative boy Michael Banks in Mary Poppins. The role placed the young British actor among Disney's child stars, forever etching his place in audiences' hearts alongside Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke. Although it was just a small part in the vast world of cinema, Garber's Michael Banks became a symbol of childhood, tied forever to the success of the Oscar-winning film that claimed 5 Academy Awards. Yet behind the brief spotlight was a fragile journey filled with loss. Born on March 25, 1956, in Stepney, London, to parents with a background in theater, Matthew Garber was described as intelligent, mischievous, and full of life. But his story turned tragic in 1976 during a trip to India, where he contracted hepatitis. Due to a lack of knowledge and his young age, the illness quickly developed into hemorrhagic pancreatitis, a death sentence with no reversal. From a boy full of promise, Matthew lost both his youth and his career in the blink of an eye. On June 13, 1977, Matthew Garber took his last breath at the Royal Free Hospital in London. He was only 21 years old. His body was cremated 3 days later at St. Marylebone Crematorium. His net worth at the time was estimated at about $500,000, largely from the 3 Disney films in which he had appeared. Julie Andrews as Mary Poppins. When Julie Andrews was 29 years old, she stepped into the role of the magical nanny Mary Poppins in the 1964 film of the same name. With her angelic voice and graceful presence, she breathed immortal life into the character, transforming Mary Poppins into a timeless cinematic icon and earning herself the Academy Award for Best Actress. Overnight, Julie Andrews rose from being a Broadway stage star to one of Hollywood's most unshakable names of the 1960s. But behind the dazzling glory was a lifelong pain. Julie Elizabeth Andrews, born on October 1, 1935, in Walton-on-Thames, England, grew up in a fractured childhood, scarred by her parents' separation and the tensions of a remarried household. Though she overcame those early wounds to achieve worldwide acclaim, fate dealt her a devastating blow in midlife. In 1997, what was supposed to be a routine operation to remove a vocal cord polyp turned disastrous. Her vocal cords were permanently damaged, silencing forever the legendary 4-octave voice that had defined her career. For an artist who lived for music, it was nothing short of a death sentence. Andrews fell into a deep depression, underwent psychological treatment, and carried a wound that would never fully heal. Now, in 2025, Julie Andrews is 90 years old. She no longer sings, but she remains a living icon, finding comfort in writing children's books, voice acting, and preserving her Disney legacy. Her net worth is estimated at $30 million. Yet for audiences, the most valuable thing she leaves behind is not measured in money, but in the memory of the woman who once stood atop the roof of 17 Cherry Tree Lane, umbrella in hand, her crystal-clear voice filling the air. That voice has fallen silent forever, but its echo continues to linger, reminding the world that even the brightest stars carry within them a pain that calls for our compassion. Glynis Johns as Mrs. Banks. When Glynis Johns was 41 years old, she played Winifred Banks, the socially active mother in Mary Poppins, 1964. With her husky, alluring voice and graceful charm, she made audiences both laugh and feel moved as she performed the song Sister Suffragette. That role cemented Johns as an unforgettable part of childhood memories for millions, standing alongside Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke in Disney's classic masterpiece. But behind the stage lights was a life filled with heartbreak. Glynis Margaret Payne Johns, born on October 5, 1923, in Pretoria, South Africa, endured 4 failed marriages. Her first husband cheated on her, the next ended in bitterness, and the later ones closed in separation. Each time she walked away from a marriage, she carried deeper wounds, with the worst scars coming from emotional abuse and betrayal. Those repeated fractures left Johns with a heart full of cracks that could never be fully mended. The greatest tragedy of her life, however, did not come from love, but from motherhood. Her only son, actor Gareth Forwood, died in 2007 after suffering a heart attack while undergoing cancer treatment. Johns admitted that it was a loss beyond measure, a blow that broke her spirit and condemned her to live the rest of her years in the shadow of grief and loneliness. With no family left to lean on, she entered a nursing home in Los Angeles, where she quietly watched her past glory fade, left only with memories and lingering sorrow. On January 4, 2024, Glynis Johns passed away at the age of 100, closing the curtain on more than 7 decades of devotion to the arts. Her net worth at the time was estimated at about $5 million. At her funeral, the song "Send in the Clowns" played as a haunting farewell, reminding the world that after a century of life, Glynis Johns remained a star who carried silent sorrow deep within her heart. Dick Van Dyke as Bert. When Dick Van Dyke was 39 years old, he brought to life the playful and multi-talented Bert, a chimney sweep, a street performer, and even the elderly banker Mr. Dawes Sr. in Mary Poppins. Though he faced harsh criticism for his clumsy Cockney accent, he still captured audiences' hearts with his wit and joyful spirit. The role not only earned him and Julie Andrews a Grammy Award, but also made Van Dyke one of the immortal faces of childhood for millions around the world. Yet outside the spotlight, his real life carried many dark chapters. Richard Wayne Van Dyke, born on December 13, 1925, in West Plains, Missouri, spent much of the 1970s trapped in alcoholism. During those years, he often lost control, damaging the trust of both family and colleagues. He entered rehab in 1972, but the emotional scars of those drunken years never fully disappeared. The nightmare grew heavier when his chain-smoking habit led to a lung cancer diagnosis in 2006. Although he was fortunate enough to recover, the illness left him with solitude and regret for a reckless past. The tragedies did not end there. One of Van Dyke's sons battled drug addiction, leaving the aging father with unending guilt. And in 2013, while driving his Jaguar on a California highway, his car suddenly burst into flames. Trapped inside and just seconds from death, he was pulled out by a passerby. The vehicle was completely destroyed, but Van Dyke escaped in a state of exhaustion. An incident that seemed to prove fate had granted him one more chance at life. By 2025, Dick Van Dyke is 100 years old. He no longer carries the agility of his youth, but he stands as a living witness to Hollywood history. His net worth is estimated at about $50 million, but such numbers pale compared to the spiritual strength he represents. Once a man consumed by addiction, illness, and tragedy, he rose again, finding new meaning in life. And for audiences, the image of Bert dancing across the rooftops of London with his radiant smile will forever remain a symbol of joy, even when behind that light was a life marked by pain. David Tomlinson as Mr. Banks. When David Tomlinson was 47 years old, he played George Banks, the stern father who eventually learns to open his heart in Mary Poppins. With a performance that was both humorous and moving, Tomlinson transformed the image of a rigid man into a symbol of redemption and fatherly love. That role not only helped etch the film deeply into audiences' memories, but also made him one of Disney's most representative faces of the 1960s. But behind the kind smile on screen was a terrifying personal tragedy. David Cecil McAllister Tomlinson, born on May 7, 1917, in Henley-on-Thames, Oxfordshire, carried a wound that never healed. In 1943, shortly after marrying his first wife, Mary Lindsay Hitting, he received devastating news. She and her 2 children from a previous relationship had leapt from a high floor of a New York hotel in a shocking murder-suicide. The trauma haunted Tomlinson for the rest of his life, leaving a darkness he always hid beneath his cinematic smile. Later, although he remarried and had 4 sons with actress Audrey Freeman, the ghosts of the past never left him. During World War II, he had narrowly escaped death when the Tiger Moth plane he was piloting crashed into a forest. And in old age, Tomlinson endured further suffering. A stroke in 1997 left him partially paralyzed and robbed him of his ability to speak. For an artist, It was as though the most precious tool to communicate with the world had been taken away. He spent his final years in silence, depression, and the shadow of unbearable loss. On June 24, 2000, David Tomlinson passed away in his sleep at King Edward VI's Hospital in London at the age of 83. His net worth at the time was estimated at around $2 million, a modest sum compared to the spiritual legacy he left behind. On his gravestone, he once joked he wanted engraved the words, "An actor of genius, irresistible to women," a final nod to the life he had lived. Karen Rice as Jane Banks. When Karen Rice was just 9 years old, she played Jane Banks, the innocent, curious little girl in Mary Poppins. With her bright eyes and natural charm, Rice became a child star known worldwide. Alongside Matthew Garber, she brought life to the Banks children, making audiences believe that Mary Poppins' magic could transform a cold household into a warm family. That moment of destiny turned Karen from an unknown little girl into one of Disney's brightest child stars. But the real life of Karen Rice, born on November 9, 1955, in Guernsey, Channel Islands, was far from a fairy tale. As an adult, she faced marital tragedy when her first husband, actor Alex Hyde White, was unfaithful, leading to their divorce in 1992. Karen was left to raise their child alone, a period filled with pain and loneliness. This devastating blow pushed her further away from the spotlight. She admitted that she had feared fame since childhood, and by the 1980s, Karen decided to leave show business entirely, abandoning her acting career to escape the pressures of stardom. By 2025, Karen Rice is 70 years old. She no longer appears before cameras, instead choosing a quiet life with her second husband, Ned Nall, and her children. Her net worth is estimated at around $1 million, largely from her Disney film legacy and later voice work. But her true value lies beyond money. Audiences will always remember Karen as the sweet Jane Banks, singing with a clear voice, holding Michael's hand as they embarked on magical adventures with Mary Poppins. Ed Wynn as Uncle Albert. When Ed Wynn was 78 years old, he played Uncle Albert, the innocent old man who laughed so hard he floated up to the ceiling, in the legendary film Mary Poppins. With his quivering voice, eccentric mannerisms, and natural charm, Wynn delivered one of the funniest and warmest scenes in Disney history. Yet few knew that behind the cheerful image on screen, he was struggling with illness and private darkness. Even as Hollywood spotlight continued to shine on him, Isaiah Edwin Leopold, born on November 9, 1886, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, dedicated his entire life to making audiences laugh while often swallowing his own tears. Wynn battled a gambling addiction that cost him much of his fortune and nearly destroyed his career in the 1930s. The tragedy of his personal life grew heavier as all three of his marriages ended in failure, leaving the comedy legend with loneliness and a fractured family. Though he managed to rebuild his career and reclaim fame, the years of vice took a toll, leaving him with a deteriorating body and a tormented spirit in his final years. On June 19, 1966, Ed Wynn passed away in Beverly Hills after a long battle with esophageal cancer, at the age of 79. Even during his last months, he continued working, trying to maintain his smile in front of the cameras despite his frail body. His net worth at the time of death was estimated at around $1 million, along with the immortal memory of the old clown who made the world laugh. On his tombstone, the brief words read, "Dear God, thanks, Ed Wynn," a moving final farewell.